If someone had told me 6 months ago that the highlight of my week would be my landlady repeatedly forgetting which room was hers, I would have suggested they seek professional help. Yet here I was. The sound of Morgan's footsteps in the hallway was a specific kind of music, a quiet percussion that set my own heart to a strange, hopeful rhythm. It was a sound that meant she was near, and in the sterile quiet of my new life, near was everything. The house itself was a 2-story craftsman, more space than one person needed, which was, I supposed, why I was there. Morgan had explained it on the day I came to see the room. Her voice was low and even, a stark contrast to the real estate agent cheerfulness I'd grown accustomed to. She didn't try to sell me on the neighborhood or the vintage crown molding, she just pointed. "This is the room," she'd said, hands tucked into the pockets of her jeans. "Bathroom's across the hall. You get the whole upstairs, really. I never come up here." It was a lie, but neither of us knew it yet. The room was large and airy, with a big window that looked out over a quiet, tree-lined street. The walls were a pale, non-committal gray, and the furniture, a bed, a desk, a dresser, was sturdy and impersonal. It was a blank slate. I had so many of those in my life already. Another one felt less like an opportunity and more like an exhaustion. But the rent was fair and the silence was deep, and I was tired of looking. I'd moved in with 2 suitcases and a box of books, a life distilled down to the bare essentials. The first week was an exercise in monastic quiet. I heard Morgan leave for work in the morning, the solid clunk of the front door, and return in the evening. The sounds of her existence were faint and distant. The low hum of the television, the clatter of a dish in the sink, the groan of pipes when she showered. She was a ghost in her own home, and I was a ghost in hers. We were 2 solitudes, coexisting under one roof, separated by a flight of stairs and a universe of unspoken things. I felt like an intruder, every creak of the floorboards under my feet a transgression. I ate takeout in my room, washed my single plate and fork in the upstairs bathroom sink, and tried to take up as little space as possible, both physically and sonically. I was a guest who was overstaying her welcome, even though I was paying for the privilege. The first time it happened, I was sitting on my bed, laptop balanced on my knees, trying to lose myself in the meaningless glow of the internet. It was late, maybe 10 o'clock. A soft knock came at the door, so hesitant I almost thought I'd imagined it. I froze. We had a system. We texted. We did not knock. I slid off the bed and padded to the door, my heart a nervous flutter against my ribs. I opened it a crack. Morgan stood there, haloed by the warm light of the hallway sconce. She was wearing a faded gray t-shirt that hung loosely on her frame and plaid pajama. Pants. Her dark hair, usually pulled back in a severe, efficient ponytail, was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked younger, softer. She winced, a motion that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "I am so sorry," she said, her voice a low murmur. "I completely forgot." "Forgot what?" I asked, my own voice thick with disuse. It was my office, before. I keep my old tax records in the closet. The accountant needs a form from 2018. She gestured vaguely toward the closet door behind me, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. "I can come back tomorrow. It's not important." She looked so genuinely mortified that I felt a pang of something I couldn't name. It was a strange mix of pity and a sudden, sharp awareness of her, of the way a stray strand of hair caught the light, the small, anxious motion of her fingers worrying the hem of her shirt. "No, it's fine," I said, opening the door wider. "Come on in. It's your house." "It's your room," she countered, but she stepped inside anyway. The space, which had felt so large and empty moments before, suddenly felt small and charged with her presence. She smelled faintly of lavender and soap, a clean, calming scent that was somehow intensely intimate. She moved past me to the closet, her arm brushing against mine. A spark, a tiny jolt of static electricity, jumped between us. Or maybe I imagined it. I stood awkwardly by the door, watching as she opened the closet and rummaged through a cardboard box on the top shelf. The t-shirt rode up slightly in the back, exposing a few inches of pale skin at the small of her back. I looked away, my face hot. This is your landlady, I told myself sternly. This is a purely transactional relationship. Got it, she said, pulling out a dusty manila folder. She turned and the look of apology was back on her face, even more intense than before. Again, Bailey, I'm really sorry to invade your space like this. It's okay, Morgan. Really. I'll try to remember to move that box downstairs, she said, already backing toward the door. Won't happen again. She slipped out into the hall, closing the door softly behind her. The room felt empty again, but it was a different kind of emptiness now. It held the echo of her. I could still smell the faint trace of lavender. I went to bed that night, replaying the encounter, the accidental brush of our arms, the sight of her messy hair. It was, I realized with a jolt, the most interesting thing that had happened to me in months. It happened again 4 days later. This time she was looking for a book. She'd lent it to a friend years ago and had just remembered it was probably in one of the boxes in the closet. She was wearing sweatpants again, a different pair, and a hoodie from a university I didn't recognize. Her apology was just as profuse, her embarrassment just as acute. I feel like such an idiot, she muttered, ducking her head as she searched. I should have cleared all my stuff out of here before you moved in. It's so disrespectful. I don't mind, I said, and the words were truer than she could ever know. I was perched on the edge of my desk chair, watching her. I was learning the cartography of her movements, the way she bit her lip when she was concentrating, the little sigh she let out when she found what she was looking for. These brief, accidental invasions became beacons in the vast, quiet sea of my days. I started to anticipate them, to listen for her footsteps after 9 o'clock. The excuses became more and more tenuous. She needed a spare light bulb that she was sure was in the back of the closet. She was looking for an old photo album. She thought she might have left a specific screwdriver in the desk drawer years ago. Each time she was a study in apologetic charm. Her hair would be slightly messy, her clothes comfortable and lived in. She was a different person from the composed, almost severe woman I occasionally passed in the kitchen in the morning, the one who was dressed for work in crisp blouses and tailored slacks. This version of Morgan was unguarded, flustered, and utterly captivating. I was falling for my landlady based on a series of 30-second, deeply awkward encounters in my own bedroom. It was pathetic. And then a thought occurred to me. A slow, creeping, hopeful little thought. What if I made it easier for her? I started leaving my door ajar, not wide open, just a crack, an invitation, a silent signal that said, "It's okay, come in." It felt like a monumental act of vulnerability, a foolish and desperate gesture. Every night, I'd arrange the door just so, my heart hammering in my chest. I'd get into bed with a book and pretend to read, but my ears would be straining for the sound of her approach. Some nights, nothing happened. She'd walk past my door to the upstairs bathroom and then back to her own room at the end of the hall. On those nights, a cold wave of disappointment would wash over me, followed by a hot flush of shame. Of course, she wasn't thinking about me. She was just a forgetful person living her life. I was a tenant, a line item in her budget. But then on a Tuesday, it worked. I heard her footsteps pause outside my door. The sliver of light from the hallway was momentarily blocked by her shadow. I held my breath. She pushed the door open slowly. "Bailey," she whispered. I looked up from my book, feigning surprise. "Hey." She was hugging a fluffy white towel to her chest, her hair damp and dark from the shower. She was wearing a thick bathrobe, cinched tight at the waist. The scent of her shampoo, that same lavender, filled the air. "Sorry," she said, her voice even softer than usual. "The door was open. I thought I heard a noise." It was the flimsiest excuse yet. We both knew it. The house was silent as a tomb. "Just me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Turning a page. A small smile played on her lips. It was the first time I'd seen her almost smile. "Right. Well..." She lingered in the doorway, not moving to leave. The silence stretched, thick and heavy with unspoken things. It wasn't awkward, not like before. It was something else. Tense, expectant. I was just thinking," she started, then stopped. She seemed to be having an argument with herself. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on my face, then the window, then the floor. "Yeah?" I prompted, my voice barely a whisper. She shook her head, as if to clear it. "Nothing. It's stupid. I think I left the extra set of sheets for the guest room in here, in the bottom drawer of the dresser. My dresser. The one filled with my clothes." "Oh," I said, my mind racing. I didn't see them. "No, of course not. You wouldn't have. They'd be way in the back." She took a step into the room. "Do you mind?" I was dreaming. This had to be a dream. Morgan, smelling of soap and steam, was about to go through my underwear drawer on the pretense of finding sheets that almost certainly weren't there. "Go ahead," I managed to say. She moved to the dresser, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. She knelt and pulled open the bottom drawer. My neatly folded sweaters and jeans were suddenly on display. She sifted through them gently, her brow furrowed in concentration. The top of her head was just visible over the edge of my bed. I could see the way her damp hair curled at the nape of her neck. The urge to reach out and touch those curls was so strong it made my hand ache. "You know," she said, her voice slightly muffled as she leaned into the drawer, "I don't think they're in here." "No?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She pushed the drawer closed and rose to her feet, turning to face me. The near smile was gone. She just looked. Lost. Her eyes were dark and serious. "No," she said. "I think I might have made that up." My breath caught in my throat. The air crackled. The quiet hum of the house, the distant drone of a car passing on the street. It all faded away until the only thing I could hear was the frantic thumping of my own blood in my ears. She didn't move. She just stood there, a few feet from my bed, her gaze locked on mine. She looked vulnerable and uncertain, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Why?" I whispered. She took a deep breath, the movement causing the lapels of her robe to shift slightly. "I don't know," she admitted, and her honesty was like a punch to the gut. "This is going to sound crazy." "Try me," I said, my voice coming out stronger than I expected. She took another step closer until she was standing right beside the bed. She reached out and rested a hand on the wooden footboard, her knuckles white. "This house," she began, her voice low and strained. "I bought it 3 years ago, after my divorce. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a big, empty place to fill with a new life." She laughed, a short, humorless sound. "But I never did. It was just big and empty. The silence was so loud, you know?" I knew. God, did I know. I nodded, unable to speak. "It was just a place where I slept, a collection of rooms. It never felt like a home." Her eyes were shining now, glistening with unshed tears. "And then you moved in." My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. "I thought it would be weird, having a stranger here. I thought I'd hate it. I'd have to share my space, I'd have to be considerate." She shook her head, a small, wondering motion. "But it wasn't like that. Hearing your footsteps upstairs, the light on under your door when I came home late. It was nice. It made the silence go away." She finally looked directly at me, her gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. "And I found myself making excuses," she whispered. "Excuses to come up here, excuses to see you, just for a minute. It was stupid. I know it's stupid. I'm your landlady, and I'm acting like a creep." "You're not a creep, Morgan," I said, and my voice was thick with emotion. When you're here, this place feels different. It feels warm." She finally let go of the footboard and wrapped her arms around herself, as if she were cold. "It feels like a home, for the first time." The confession hung in the air between us, fragile and shimmering. It was more than I had ever dared to hope for. All my lonely, silent yearning, all my over-analysis of her every move. It wasn't just in my head. It was real. She felt it too. I shifted on the bed, making a space, an invitation. "I started leaving the door open," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "Hoping you would." Her eyes widened. A flicker of disbelief followed by a wave of something that looked like relief. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Slowly, as if in a dream, she sat down on the edge of the bed. She didn't touch me. We just sat there, in the soft glow of my bedside lamp, the silence between us no longer tense but filled with a profound and trembling understanding. "You did?" she whispered. I nodded. "For weeks?" A real smile finally broke through, a dazzling, beautiful thing that transformed her face. It made her look years younger, carefree. "God," she breathed out, a laugh catching in her throat. "We're a pair of idiots." "Yeah," I agreed, a smile of my own spreading across my face. "We are." She reached out then, her fingers hesitant, and gently brushed my cheek. Her touch was feather light, but it sent a shockwave through my entire body. It was a question. I leaned into her hand, closing my eyes for a moment, just savoring the contact I had dreamed about for so long. It was warm and real. When I opened my eyes, her face was very close to mine. Her expression was soft, her lips slightly parted. The scent of lavender was all around me, and it felt like coming home. She was the one who closed the remaining distance. The kiss was nothing like I had imagined. It wasn't frantic or desperate. It was slow and gentle, a soft, searching pressure. It was a question and an answer all at once. It tasted of relief and soap and a future I hadn't known I was allowed to want. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. Her breath was warm on my skin. "I really don't have any sheets in your dresser," she murmured against my lips. "I know," I whispered back. "I'm kinda glad." She stayed. Not for the whole night, but for a long time. We didn't do much more than talk, our voices low whispers in the quiet room. She told me about her job as an architect, the long hours and the pressure. I told her about the bad breakup that had sent me looking for a new place, a new life, a room in a quiet house owned by a stranger. We unspooled the lonely threads of our lives, weaving them together in the lamplight. It was easy. Easier than anything had been in years. There was no pretense, no performance. Just the simple, staggering truth of two people finding a sanctuary in each other. When she finally stood to leave, it felt different. There was no apology in her eyes, no awkwardness. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "You can close it if you want," she said softly. The door. "I don't want to," I replied, and the certainty in my own voice surprised me. She smiled that brilliant, soul-shaking smile again. "Good." Then she was gone, and the room was quiet once more. But it was a peaceful quiet now, a contented quiet. I lay awake for a long time, my fingers tracing the spot on my lips where she had kissed me, the echo of her presence a warm, living thing in the space around me. The house no longer felt empty, it felt full. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the morning. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. Real coffee, not the instant sludge I usually made in my room with hot water from the bathroom tap. I lay in bed for a moment, disoriented. The events of the night before came rushing back in a dizzying, joyful flood. It hadn't been a dream. I pulled on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, my hands trembling slightly. I ran a brush through my hair, looked at my reflection in the mirror. I looked the same, but everything was different. Walking down the stairs felt like crossing a new frontier. Morgan was in the kitchen. She was standing at the counter, her back to me, wearing a soft-looking knit sweater and leggings. Her hair was in its usual ponytail, but it seemed less severe today. She was pouring coffee into 2 mugs. Not 1. 2. She must have heard me because she turned, a small, shy smile on her face. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I replied, my voice a little hoarse. "I made coffee," she said, stating the obvious. I wasn't sure how you took it. "Black is fine," I said, moving to stand on the other side of the kitchen island. It felt strange to be in this part of the house. In all the weeks I'd lived here, I had never once set foot in her kitchen. It was a warm, bright space, with a big window over the sink that looked out onto a slightly overgrown backyard. A stack of architectural magazines sat neatly on one end of the counter. It was her space, and she was inviting me in. She slid one of the mugs across the polished granite countertop to me, Our fingers brushed as I took it. This time, the spark was undeniable. She met my eyes, and the blush was back on her cheeks, but it wasn't from embarrassment. It was something else, something warm and hopeful. We drank our coffee in a comfortable silence. The morning sun streamed through the window, catching dust motes dancing in the air. It was a simple, domestic scene, but it felt momentous. Every normal, everyday detail seemed heightened, imbued with new meaning. The weight of the ceramic mug in my hands, the rich, bitter taste of the coffee, the sound of her breathing across the island. "So," she said, finally breaking the silence. She cleared her throat, her gaze fixed on her mug. "Last night." My heart did a little flip. "Yeah," I said softly. She looked up, her expression open and earnest. "I meant what I said." "I know," I said. "Me too." Relief washed over her features. "Okay," she breathed out. "Good. I don't really know how this works." "How what works?" "This," she said, gesturing vaguely between the two of us. "Dating your tenant or whatever this is." "I don't think there's a rule book," I said, and a small laugh escaped me. It felt good to laugh. She smiled back. "Probably for the best. I'm not great at following rules." She took a sip of her coffee. Clearly, the playful jab at her own fabricated excuses made my stomach flutter. This was new, this easy banter. "So," I ventured, feeling bold, "what happens now?" She considered this for a moment, her expression turning serious again. "Well," she said slowly, "for starters, I think we can agree that I have no more legitimate reasons to ever enter your room again. All my worldly possessions have now been magically transported from that closet." I grinned. "That's a shame. I was getting used to the intrusions." "Were you?" Her eyes sparkled. "They were the best part of my day," I admitted, the confession slipping out before I could stop it. My face grew hot. Morgan's smile softened. She reached across the island and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was warm and smooth. "Mine too," she said, her voice dropping to that low, intimate murmur that did strange things to my insides. We stood like that for a long moment, hands clasped over the cool stone of the counter, the unspoken promises of the future hanging in the sunlit air between us. It felt fragile and yet incredibly strong, like a thread of spun gold. The weeks that followed were a quiet revelation. We moved slowly, cautiously, as if handling something precious. The dynamic of our lives shifted, the lines blurring between landlady and tenant, between stranger and something more. My room upstairs still felt like my own, but the rest of the house began to feel like mine too. We started having dinner together. At first it was just once or twice a week. I'd offer to cook and she'd accept, watching me with a curious, amused expression as I navigated her kitchen. Then she started cooking for me, simple meals we'd eat at the kitchen island, talking about our days. I learned that she hated cilantro, that she loved old black and white movies, that she had a dry, wicked sense of humor that only came out when she felt comfortable. She learned that I was a terrible morning person, that I had a weakness for terrible reality television, and that I always read the last page of a book first. She teased me about it relentlessly. One Saturday, I was curled up on the sofa in the living room reading when she came in with a laundry basket. She stopped in the doorway, a familiar look of hesitation on her face. It was a ghost of her old awkwardness. "Sorry," she said automatically. "I'm not invading, I swear. Just doing laundry." I looked up from my book and smiled. "Morgan," I said gently, "you live here. You're allowed to do laundry." She blinked, as if the thought had just occurred to her. A slow smile spread across her face. "Right, I keep forgetting." "You don't have to apologize for existing in your own house," I added. "Old habits," she murmured, walking past the sofa and heading toward the basement door. As she passed, her fingers brushed lightly against the top of my head, a casual, affectionate gesture that made my heart swell. It was these small moments that were rebuilding me. The way she'd bring me a cup of tea without asking when she knew I was working late. The way she started leaving the hall light on for me if she went to bed first. The way her face would light up when I came home from work. My life, which had felt so empty and gray, was suddenly being flooded with color. One rainy Sunday afternoon, we were sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by piles of her old architectural drawings. She was showing me a project she'd designed years ago, a beautiful lakeside cabin. "I never built it," she said, her finger tracing the clean, elegant lines on the blueprint. "The client backed out at the last minute." "It's beautiful," I said, and I meant it. It was simple and modern, but it looked warm and inviting. It looked like a place someone could be happy. "Maybe I'll build it for myself one day," she said wistfully. "Find a little plot of land somewhere quiet." She looked over at me, her expression unreadable. "A place to get away." The idea of her getting away, of her leaving this house, sent a sudden, sharp pang of fear through me. I tried to hide it, but she saw it. She always saw everything. "Hey," she said softly, reaching over and taking my hand. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied. She just looked at me, her gaze steady and patient. "It's just," I finally admitted, my voice small. "This is all temporary, isn't it? I'm the tenant. Eventually I'll move out, or you'll sell the house, or you'll build your cabin." The insecurity I'd been trying so hard to keep at bay came rushing to the surface. I was a temporary fixture in her life, a solution to her loneliness and her mortgage. Sooner or later, the lease would be up. Morgan's expression softened with understanding. She squeezed my hand. "Is that what you think this is?" she asked. "A lease agreement?" "I don't know what it is," I confessed, looking down at our joined hands. She used her other hand to gently tilt my chin up, forcing me to meet her eyes. "Bailey," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "Look at me." I did. Her eyes were dark and serious, and they were filled with an emotion that made my breath catch. "This house was just a building before you got here," she said, her voice low and intense. "It was 4 walls and a roof. You're the one who made it a home. Don't you get that? It's not about the space. It's about you being in it." She let go of my chin and reached into the pocket of her jeans. She pulled something out and held it in her palm. It was a single, shiny key. It wasn't a copy of my upstairs room key. I recognized it from the few times I'd seen her use it. It was the key to the front door. She closed my hand around it. The metal was cool against my skin. "I am not your landlady," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not anymore, and you are not my tenant." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "I don't know what we are exactly," she continued, a vulnerable tremor in her voice. "And I don't know where we're going, but I know I don't want you to leave, ever, unless it's with me to go see the lake where we're going to build that cabin." The word "we" hung in the air, a beautiful, terrifying, wonderful promise. My eyes filled with tears, blurring her face into a soft watercolor. "So," she finished, her voice barely a whisper, "I guess what I'm trying to say is, would you like to stay? Not as a tenant, as whatever this is, as my partner in not being lonely anymore." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, a wave of emotion so powerful it stole my breath. I tightened my grip on the key, the sharp edges digging into my palm, grounding me. It was real. This was real. She leaned in and kissed me, and this kiss was different from all the others. It was deeper, more certain. It was a seal on a promise. It tasted like coffee and rain and the rest of my life. When we finally broke apart, I was smiling through my tears. "A partner in not being lonely," I repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." "Good," she said, her own eyes suspiciously bright. She gestured to the blueprints scattered around us. "Because I was thinking the master bedroom in the cabin should have a much bigger closet, so we don't have to keep any of our old tax records in the guest room." I laughed, a real, happy sound that echoed in the quiet house, a house that no longer felt like hers, or like a temporary stop for me. It felt like ours. The silence was gone, replaced by the steady, comforting beat of a life being built together. One shared glance, one cup of coffee, one awkward, beautiful, life-changing invasion at a time. It was home. We were home.